Shalom, everyone, and welcome to Wow equals Words of Wisdom number 13. Do you have control of your thought life? We need to ask ourselves that question each and every day. A lot of times we don't give it much thought, okay, when it comes to our thought life. We don't think about what we're thinking about. Okay. We don't think about where we're investing our thoughts, what we're allowing to, rent space in our minds. And for some of us, we have allowed certain types of thoughts to not only rent a space, but to come in and just move in and build a house in our minds. And it's consuming our thought life in a negative way. And so it's very, very important to make sure that we have our thought lives under control. Because what we are seeing manifested, physically in our lives each and every day is a result of what is here. Okay? And so if what we're seeing manifested in our lives is negative, is sinful, is corrupt, is wrong, is wicked, is a direct result of what's going on here that we don't have control over. And so I ask you again, do you have control over your thought life? And we have to start thinking about this every day. We have to be intentional about our thought life. We have to make sure that we just don't allow anything to just come across our eye gates. We can't let anything just come into our ear gates. So that means we have to be careful about what we watch, what we read, what we view, as far as movies, television shows, magazines, books, what we look at on social media, all of these types of things, what we look at on, different websites and things of that nature, who we listen to, what types of music we listen to. Whose advice we take. Because of the fact that all of those things are feeding our minds through our ear gate and our eye gates. And they're cultivating thoughts in our minds. Seeds are being planted on the canvas of our minds. All of the time. All of the time. And there's a battle that's going on all the time for space in our minds. And so we have to be intentional about what we allow on the canvas of our minds. We have to be very, very careful about the seeds that we allow to be planted on the ground of our minds. And a lot of people, their minds, the canvas of their minds, the soil of their minds have become corrupted because of what they watch, what they listen to, what they view, and what they consume through their ear gates and through their eye gates. And so their minds have become corrupted. And this has happened to basically everybody to some level and some degree. If you've watched TV at any point in time in your life, okay, and there are people out there who, really have watched little to no TV in their life. But for the rest of us, who have watched TV, throughout their lives and maybe are coming off of watching TV so much, and we're really being careful about what we look at, and what we view online, and what movies we're going to watch and things of that nature. We're doing those things now, but maybe there was a time in our lives where we looked at anything that came across the screen. Those were seeds that were being planted in our minds, and so we see those things like play out in our lives because of the fact that we're being driven by the thoughts. We're being driven by our thoughts. And so you see people who are fearful and full of anxiety and depressed and oppressed and sad, angry, vengeful, all of these types of things. And it don't think that they just got that way, overnight. It started with a thought. And they didn't get their thoughts under control. And at some point, they started acting out what they were thinking about. And so you have to, really, ask yourself that question. Do you have your thought life under control? You hear about people all the time, saying, I have a problem with lust. And these same people are, looking at magazines, pornographic magazines, pornographic, movies, or, stuff online that's pornographic. If you have a problem with lust, that's why. Okay? That's why. Or you might be hanging around people and that's all they talk about is sexual things. And you may have to, cut ties with people. You may have, I've heard people say they had to stay off of the internet. They had to stay off of the internet. I had a client years and years ago. They said he had a problem with this. And he said he had to stop going to the mall. He had to stop going to the mall so that he wouldn't, be taking in with his eyes, looking at, the different women that he would come across in the mall. So he stopped going to the mall. So he was trying to take control over what he was taking in with his eyes. And so we have to think about these things. If you're having problems, if you're always afraid, constantly, you're afraid of everything. If you're walking around in doubt and unbelief, and you're fearful, and you have low self-esteem, and you have low self-confidence and low self-worth, that's a problem with how you're thinking about yourself. You don't see yourself the way the Most High Yah sees you. You've got some other seeds planted on the canvas and the soil of your mind. And so we've really got to think about these things. How do you get control of your thought life? How do you do that? Now in Philippians 4:8, it says this, which gives you a really, really excellent blueprint on how you can get control of your thought life. Finally, brethren, whatsoever things are honest, whatsoever things are just, whatsoever things are pure, whatsoever things are lovely, whatsoever things are of good report, if there be any virtue, and if there be any praise, think on these things. Wow. It's telling you right here what things you need to be thinking about. And in order for you to think about things that are honest, just, pure, lovely, and of good report, and virtuous things, and praiseworthy things, you have to be intentional about what you're thinking about. And how do you do that? 2 Corinthians chapter 10, verse 5. Casting down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of Yah, and bringing into captivity every thought to the obedience of the Mashiach. So you can't just allow thoughts that are sinful, wicked, wrong, lustful, envious, jealousy, covetous, thoughts to just stay in your mind and just, simmer and grow and brew, and fester till they become full grown in your mind. And then they move from your mind to your mouth, and you start speaking what's on your mind. All of us have heard that phrase, speak your mind. Tell me what's on your mind. Okay? All of us have heard those phrases. And this is very true. And from out of the heart, from out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaks. And so in scripture, when we hear heart and mind, they're synonymous and they coincide with one another. And so in order for us to make sure that we have control over our thought life, we have to make sure that we're casting down imaginations. And a lot of people are not doing that. A thought comes in their mind and they start daydreaming and they start thinking about it and they think about it and like I said, they let it cook and brew and simmer and fester. And next thing you know, the person is saying it, and the next thing after they're saying it, they've spoke it into existence. And after that, they're carrying it out, whatever that thought may be. And so we have to make sure that we cast down imaginations and every high thing that exalts itself against the knowledge of Yah. So any thoughts that you may be having or that I may be having that exalts itself against the knowledge of Yah, we've got to cast it down. We've got to cast it down. Something keeps coming up, you've got to cast it down. You can't keep holding on to it. See, a lot of times we hold on to the thought, but you got to cast it down. If it comes back up again, you got to cast it down. You got to throw it down. It says, and bringing into captivity every thought, not just one thought or two thoughts, but every thought. Every thought. So if you have a thought that is a jealous thought about somebody else, you got to cast it down. And then if the next thought that you have is a thought about you lying to someone, you've got to cast that down too, because we've learned that in Philippians 4:8 that it says we should be thinking about things that are honest. So if you have a thought that is coming up in your mind that's telling you to come up with a lie to tell someone, you need to cast that thought down, because that is, a thought that is against being honest. And that's a thought that is against the knowledge of Yah, that is against being obedient to his commandments. So that's a thought that needs to be cast down. Okay? If you have, impure thoughts, lustful thoughts about some man or some woman, okay? that thought needs to be cast down. And it needs to be taken into captivity. It needs to be arrested. Okay? And it needs to be cast out of your mind. And you need to do this every time. Because instead of having impure thoughts, instead of having lustful thoughts, you're supposed to be having pure thoughts. Remember, we're supposed to be thinking on these things. Okay? So it says, if there be anything that is of good report. If you're constantly, people are just coming to you, telling you constantly about their drama all the time, and that's all you're taking into your mind all the time, and then all of a sudden you're constantly thinking about bad things and dysfunction and things that that have to do with drama all the time. You've got to cast those thoughts down. And you may have to stop hanging around people who are filled with drama in their life, who are filled with dysfunction in their lives. You stop looking at those soap operas, which definitely fill your mind with bad reports. And then next thing you know, those, drama-filled, dysfunctional, bad reports are in your thoughts. And those things are coming out of your mouth and you're negative. And next thing you know, those things are being manifested in your life. Instead of you thinking on things that are of good report, you've got those bad reports being manifested in your life. And you're like, why am I always a day late and $1 short? I can't win for losing. Nothing good ever happens to me. That's because you didn't take into captivity every thought. Every thought. That means you have to have a disciplined life. You have to be disciplined in your thought life. You just can't allow thoughts to be in your mind running around all willy-nilly and you not taking control of your thought life. This is extremely important to our spiritual growth. You just can't run around thinking what you want and thinking that you are going to grow in your relationship with the Most High Yah, and think that you're going to be able to walk in His commandments and His statutes to the level and degree that He is asking you to. It's just not going to happen if you're not getting control of your thought life. You have to think about what you're thinking about. And you have to do it consistently, continuously, throughout the day. Every thought, whether you think it's major or minor, but every thought. You have to think about every thought. Because as soon as you stop thinking about what you're thinking about, that's when thoughts start creeping in that can ruin your life. And there are so many people that have allowed so many corruptible thoughts to get in, and they never took those thoughts captive, and they are tormented, and they are on a path that leads to death and destruction because they were undisciplined in their thought life and they never got control over their thoughts. So think about that as you go throughout the day. Think about what you're thinking about. And if you have, thoughts of unforgiveness, bitterness, jealousy, envy, impure thoughts, lustful thoughts. You know, you're always thinking about, lying and getting over, and you slip, dipping and tripping in the booth, in the back, in the corner, in the dark, trying to see how you can get away with sin. Those are surefire indications that you do not have control of your thought life. And you need to go before the Most High Yah in prayer and humble yourself and ask for forgiveness and ask Him to reveal to you and to show you where those thoughts started to come in and started to enter in, and ask Him to show you what you need to do to purge and cleanse your thoughts of all of the things that you have been thinking about that are not pleasing to the Most High Yah, and start filling your thought life with things that are pure, that are lovely, that are just, that are honest, that are of virtue, that are of good report, that are praiseworthy. These are the things that we are supposed to be thinking about. And most of all, we should be meditating on and thinking about the Most High Yah and who He is and what He has commanded us to do. And when you start investing your time thinking along those lines, you won't have time to think about the things that are going to lead you down a path to death and destruction. So I just want to thank you for joining me for WOW equals Words of Wisdom number 13. And I pray that you have a powerful, positive, and productive day. And with that, I will leave you with shalom. I'll see you next time.